Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Following 11 rounds of arguments, the Constitutional Court has finished reviewing the allegations against President Yoon Suk Yeol, from obstruction of parliamentary activities to the use of emergency martial law directives. Now, with the final arguments concluded, all eyes are on the court as it prepares to deliver its verdict. In his final statement Tuesday, President Yoon made a bold pledge to push for constitutional reform if reinstated. He emphasized that a revision is essential to better fit the country's present and future. He also delivered two apologies, one to the people for the confusion caused by the emergency measures, and another referencing young supporters who faced legal trouble after his arrest. Now that the trial has concluded, let's delve into the prospects. And for this, we invite attorney Kim Ji-soo here in the studio with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Cho Hee-kyung, professor of law at Hongik University. Thank you for coming, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with Attorney Kim first. So the impeachment trial of President Yoon concluded with its 11th hearing yesterday. How do you assess the overall proceedings so far? And do you think it was enough? Sufficient review has been conducted?
Well, I believe that the impeachment trial has been conducted quite well, since this case was a really high profile and there are a lot of political complexities surrounding this case, such as the judge's political leans, family ties, and the exclusion of witnesses. And there were also the issue of the appointment of Judge Ma Eun-hyuk. And despite these political complexity, I think the court has definitely did quite a good job of laying out these complicated issues, such as they applied this unlimited hearing sessions. So for that, both sides can elaborate and insist their own arguments without any time constraints. So in the end, the trial has upheld procedural fairness, ensuring a comprehensive review. So I do believe that this will be reflected in the conclusion that we'll be hearing soon.
Right, so there had been more additional hearings to be fair enough for Yoon's side as well. Now let's bring in Professor Cho also into the conversation. So during the 11th hearing, both the National Assembly and the President's legal team presented their final arguments on key issues, including obstruction of parliamentary activities and directives to detain politicians and legal professionals. So in your review, what's the most critical issue that will determine the Constitutional Court's final decision?
Well, in an impeachment trial, it's always a question of whether a public official has committed such a serious breach of the Constitution and the law or the laws that he or she is not considered to be fit to hold the office and should be dismissed. So what the Constitutional Court would be looking at is whether the defendant, in this case, President Yoon, has protected and upheld the Constitution and the laws, or whether he has acted contrary to them. And so they will be focusing in particular on the way he declared the martial law and whether he's complied with the legal requirements therein, or whether he has not complied fully with them. And so if you look at the questions that the justices of the court were asking, they were really focusing on the procedural conditions that needed to be fulfilled, as well as the substantive grounds on which martial law can be declared, and also subsequent acts and conducts and orders that were made under the martial law. And through the testimonies, we saw that there were lots of gaps. For example, the lack of a proper State Council meeting, documents that were not ratified by any of the members, no proper notification to the National Assembly. And that's just, beginning of the procedural requirements that were not met. And there were serious flaws in the substantive grounds on which the order could have been declared, as well as affecting the independent organs of the state, such as the National Assembly, the Electoral Commission, that really do not come within the jurisdiction of martial law, and yet soldiers were ordered to, secure the compound of National Assembly. They were ordered to enter the National Electoral Commission building, and so forth. So I think there were lots of issues that were arising out of these illegalities, and that those were the kind of things that the court would be focusing on.
Right. So largely it would center on whether he complied with the legal procedures and requirements in the process. So
Whether whether he actually protects and continues to uphold the laws or not.
Right, of course. Now let's also talk about President Yoon making history as the first sitting South Korean president to personally deliver a final statement in the impeachment trial. So during his 67-minute speech, he spent much of the time criticizing major opposition party and justifying, the martial law measures as well. What's your assessment as a legal expert?
Well, personally, I think it was a really smart move and also very effective one. He framed his decision as to be a last resort to protect the national stability in declaring the martial law. And it's interesting is that his strategic statements have shifted the focus from individuals' violation into a more kind of a political persecution, portraying himself as a kind of a victim than the wrongdoers. And also there's this interesting part that his promise to reform constitution and political whole system. And this is just not about clearing his name, but this is a very smart move for his leading a political comeback and making his return seem like a political stability rather than to be looked as a political strife. And overall, his team and him is doing really well in insisting their statements, since there is no solid evidence that he has declared the martial law in order to secure the national security. However, there's only circumstantial evidence here, but his team and President Yoon definitely has made people believe that there were a lot of risk at that very moment. And I do believe that this kind of example can make a precedent when there is a political cases and handled in the future.
Right, so it was a smart move in terms of legal strategies, but we still have to see how people take it. But in his final remarks, President Yoon also issued a public apology and even suggested a constitutional amendment, like Attorney Kim said, to shorten his term if he's reinstated. Professor Cho, how should we reinterpret this? And do you think it could influence the court's decision as well?
He apologized for the confusion caused to the public for his declaration of martial law. And I really wonder how many people would actually consider that as a sufficient apology, because he has not only caused confusion, but he really has caused chaos in the entire nation for the last 2 months, and so much uncertainty that has really affected our economic conditions as well as our diplomatic situation. And so he really has a lot more to answer for than just confusion among the people. And I would really question whether it was an effective legal strategy on the part of President Yoon to deliver the kind of final address in the hearing that he did. It might have been an effective political strategy that can appeal to his core supporters who are holding vigil outside the Constitutional Court, but it certainly wasn't an effective legal strategy, because there was nothing in his final address that really rebutted in any kind of way the substantial evidence that was presented of his illegality, his illegal conduct all throughout before the court. And so I would question that categorization. I think President Yoon basically decided that his only way out is for the Conservative Party to return to power, and that he should be pardoned or he should be somehow restored. And that's really the only way that he can come out of this, with any kind of political life remaining. And so that might have been the strategy that he's taken, but it certainly wasn't a very effective legal strategy in my view.
Right, so he wasn't able to provide evidence that could rebut the current evidences. And it was more of a political strategy. So it will be interesting, definitely, to see how people will interpret this development moving forward. Now, in past impeachment trials, Attorney Kim, it took about 2 weeks from the conclusion of arguments until the final ruling. So in President Yoon's case, when do you anticipate the court will deliver its verdict? And what are the next steps following this final arguments?
Well, I think this same thing will happen for President Yoon also. So his hearing wrapped it up in February 25th. So it takes about like 1 week to 2 weeks, as you said, because there needs time for the judge to review the case and make a vote. So we're expecting the conclusion to be on between March 6th and March 13th. And as for the final arguments over, the Constitutional Court is headed to deliberation. So they are going to meet in a private committee in order to review the case, and then they're going to vote. And if the Judge Ma Eun-hyuk isn't appointed, only 8 judges will be part of this vote, and it takes at least 6 out of 9 judges in favor to remove Yoon from the cabinet itself. And once the decision is made, the court will announce the verdict date prior to 3 to 5 days, and then it's going to be delivered in public hearing, just as the case we already experienced in prior Park Geun-hye's case.
Right, so we will be really able to know the situation, how it unfolds in the next couple of days or so. Meanwhile, the Constitutional Court is set to rule on February 27th regarding the authority dispute case over the non-appointment of Constitutional Court Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk. Professor Jo, could this decision become a last-minute variable in the impeachment trial ruling?
Yes, there is a possibility that it could be become a last-minute variable in 2 cases. So one is if Yoon requests Ma to because of Ma's appointment as the 9th Justice to the Constitutional Court bench, Yoon can actually request the entire trial to be reheard because Ma would not have had the opportunity to hear the trial, and that can obviously, lengthen the time it will take to deliver the verdict. And I don't think anybody really would want to countenance that. But against that are 2 potential outcomes. First is that Ma can actually recuse himself because he has not sat on any of the hearings that has been going on since the middle of last December, so more than 2 months. And he can actually recuse himself and say that he won't be participating in the judgment process, and then it no longer becomes a variable. The other alternative is that the rest of the justices, the 8 justices of the Constitutional Court, can also decide, no, we are not going to include the new Justice Ma, in the judgment process, and therefore deny Yoon's request for a rehearing with Ma on the bench. So I think most likely scenario is that Ma, even if appointed, is likely to recuse himself, thereby avoiding this kind of controversy and delay.
Right, but since you've mentioned, I just want to ask, is there a slight chance for this whole trial to be reheard, Professor?
There is always the possibility, because it is possible in theory, but I really do not see that happening in reality.
All right, let's hope that wouldn't. Now, shifting gears, President Yoon's legal team has reignited the so-called warrant shopping controversy, arguing that the CIO initially requested a warrant from the Seoul Central District Court for an investigation into President Yoon's insurrection charges. But after repeated rejections, ultimately they obtained the approval from the Seoul Western District Court. So given that President's legal team has now submitted a detention cancellation request, do you think the latest controversy would affect the review of the request itself?
Well, first, the fact that the CIO has sought a different court after they are rejected definitely raises a concern in the procedure itself. And if the court finds out that the CIO has sought a favorable court, this could undermine the legitimacy of detention, and definitely it provides a very strong ground for cancellation. And while the warrant shopping definitely acts as a very strong argument for President Yoon's side, I think the final decision will come down to whether the court will weight on the problem. For example, like there is a problem of procedural fairness and there's a problem of seriousness of the charges. So if the court sees Yoon's charges as to be a major seriousness, they're just going to they're not going to cancel the detention itself, even though there is some flaw in the procedure. And if the court sees, I'm really sorry, I have to end up right over here. Yeah, that's all I can say right now. Yes.
Right. So with this, then when would we expect a decision on President Yoon's detention cancellation request?
Well, the court hasn't officially announced a timeline, and it's really hard to tell. But however, since the hearing took place on February 20th, I think we can expect the decision to be decided soon. And as whether this ruling affects the impeachment verdict, I think the impeachment trial is focused only on constitutional violations and Yoon's fitness for office, not his detention status. So I think while the detention ruling is politically significant, it is unlikely to directly impact the impeachment decision, I see.
So not likely to make any influence on that.
Yes.
Now, Professor Cho, separate from the impeachment trial, President Yoon is also facing criminal trial related to charges of leading an insurrection. Do you believe the outcome of the impeachment trial will have any impact on the progression of his criminal case?
Well, it depends on which way the impeachment trial is decided. So in that unlikely case that the impeachment motion is rejected by the court, then that is going to have a significant impact on the criminal case, because if the Constitutional Court rejects impeachment motion, that means that they do not accept that Yoon's conduct on that night of 3rd of December and following is in violation of Constitution, and that would mean that it would be much more difficult to prove criminal insurrection, which is what he is charged with. And so the criminal proceeding might not run for very long and might be decided in Yoon's favor. There is greater possibility of that. But I've already said that it's very unlikely that the Constitutional Court would reject the impeachment motion. So if Yoon is impeached by the Constitutional Court accepting the motion to impeach him, then that in itself is not going to have a direct impact on the criminal case, because they are two separate cases and they really don't affect each other. And also, in a criminal trial, the evidentiary standard is much higher than before a constitutional court. So even things that the Constitutional Court found were proven before them might be rejected by the criminal court. And so in the end, Yoon might be cleared of criminal charges. However, once he is impeached, he no longer enjoys the presidential immunity. He can only be charged with 2 crimes, which is treason or insurrection. But once he's removed from the office, then he no longer enjoys that immunity, and he can be charged with all other potential crimes that he might have committed, starting with abuse of office, corruption, violation of electoral laws, and so on and so forth. So he will most likely face many other criminal charges once he is impeached and removed from the office.
Right, so it will all depend on the results of the final verdict. Professor, thank you for your insights. As we've discussed, the impeachment trial of President Yoon carries significant legal and political weight, with its outcome influencing not only his presidency, but also the broader judicial and political landscape as well. So with the Constitutional Court set to deliver its verdict soon, the nation awaits a decision that could shape the course of the governance. We will continue to monitor the developments and bring you the latest updates as they unfold. But for now, we'll have to leave our discussion here. We appreciate your insights, Professor Cho.
Thank you.
And also Attorney Kim.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.